The war in Ukraine is a frozen conflict. It's not ending anytime soon, and it may not have any real winners. That's what happens with long-drawn conflicts. No winners, but clear losers. The losers are the people of those countries. Just look at Iraq. In 2003, the US launched a war on Iraq. 19 years have passed. The US found no weapons of mass destruction. They made a mess of the country and left. And now Iraqis are paying the price for America's actions. In the last 19 years, the country has hurtled from one crisis to another. Let me show you the latest images. Angry citizens storming the Iraqi parliament. These pictures may remind you of what happened in Colombo, but the situation in Iraq is very different. You could say much worse than Sri Lanka. These protesters breached a high security zone. They pulled down a wall and broke into the Iraqi parliament. Riot police was deployed there. They tried to stop the protesters. They even fired water cannons, but the protesters overpowered them. Once they were inside, the protesters chanted slogans. They gathered on the floor of the parliament. They sat on the chairs of lawmakers. They looked through files and folders. It was complete chaos. And it's been brewing for a while. Iraq has been caught in political turmoil for months. 9 months ago, elections were held in this country. No candidate was able to win majority. And since then, lawmakers have struggled to reach a deal. When they finally did, it sparked a public uprising. Recently, Mohammed al-Sudani was picked to become the Prime Minister of Iraq. He's seen as a pro-Iranian candidate. Al-Sudani is being challenged by Muqtada al-Sadr, an influential Shiite cleric. Also, the driving force behind these protests, most of those who stormed the parliament yesterday are supporters of al-Sadr. They say they do not want corrupt leaders in power.
The Iraqi people are asking every honorable man and every honorable politician to hold all thieves of public money accountable. As politicians say, from under the dome of parliament, we demand to hold all corrupt people accountable. And on top of this list is former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki.
From the dome of the parliament, we are the Iraqi people and we do not want you, Maliki. We do not want you, al-Sudani. We do not want any of those people. Maliki, why are you sticking to the government? Why is it still here? You should collect your stuff and leave the country. The people are very tired. The people collapsed. They are hungry and doing drugs. The people are fed up.
Iraq is in dire straits. The political impasse is making things worse. The country has not had a president, a prime minister, or a government for 290 days. You heard that right. Iraq has not had a government for 290 days now. This is their longest post-election deadlock. But it's not their first. Not the first time that Iraq has been paralyzed. From 2019 to 2021, Iraq witnessed massive protests. There was a series of marches and demonstrations. The reasons were the same: state corruption, sectarianism, unemployment, low wages, and poor public services. This is also not the first time the Iraqi parliament was stormed. In 2016, al-Sadr supporters overran the parliament in a similar fashion. So why does it keep happening again and again? Because Iraq remains an unstable country, that's why. 19 years after America invaded and devastated it, Iraq has not been able to find its feet. Look at their economy. Before the war, Iraq had a prospering economy. It was rich thanks to its oil reserves. Iraq had one of the most advanced economies in West Asia. In the 80s, Iraq had $35 billion in its reserves. It also had one of the best education systems in the world. In the early 1970s, education at all levels was free. Enrollment in primary schools stood at 100%. Healthcare was free too. Before 1990, 97% of the urban population had access to free primary health care. 71% of the rural population had the same level of access. And to be fair, Iraq's economy did start stumbling under Saddam Hussein. It accumulated debt worth around $40 billion. But there's no denying the fact that this complete collapse happened after the American invasion. They dismantled the Saddam regime and robbed his country. There's no other way to put it. It was robbery. Money that was supposed to be used to help Iraqis went to American companies. How did that happen? Let me explain. Iraq's main source of revenue was the export of oil. Once the Saddam regime was toppled, a consolidated fund was created. It was under the control of the Coalition Provisional Authority, the CPA, a sort of a transition government. And this government was established by the US and its allies. These funds financed Iraq's reconstruction. America also sponsored some of these reconstruction efforts. It was supposed to rehabilitate Iraqis. But it ended up benefiting American companies. Consider this. More than 70 American companies and individuals won reconstruction contracts in Iraq. They were paid from Iraq's revenues. This was during the first year of the occupation alone. How many contracts did Iraqi firms get? Next to none. Only 2% of the money spent on reconstruction went into Iraqi hands. How much did American firms profit from the conflict? America's top 10 contractors got a whopping $72 billion. When the Americans finally left, Iraq was bankrupt. And since then, millions of people have sunk into poverty. In 2018, Iraq's poverty rate stood at 20%. Last year, it shot up to 30%. At least 12 million Iraqis are considered poor today. Their country was plundered in more ways than one. It lost many of its cultural and historic treasures too. The US invasion led to mass looting. Tens of thousands of antiques were looted. Curators at the Iraqi Museum made desperate pleas to Washington. They wanted the museum and its artifacts to be secured, but the US government paid them no heed. The museum was looted. The then US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was asked about this. Do you know what he said? Stuff happens. Those were his words. Stuff happens. To Iraq, that stuff is still happening, unfortunately. Iraq still hasn't been able to recover its lost treasures. At least 15,000 items were taken from Iraqi museums. 8,000 of them are still missing. With the invasion, Iraq has lost its identity. It remains stuck in a seemingly endless spiral of violence. It has witnessed an insurgency in Fallujah. It has seen attacks by criminal gangs, Sunni militias, terrorist groups like the Al-Qaeda. In 2014, it witnessed the uprising of a deadly terrorist group, the Islamic State. And all of this happened due to a leadership vacuum. The US came to install democracy in Iraq. It has left behind a legacy of economic crisis, sectarianism, and violence. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.